Welcome back to my Solace podcast. Today we've got a special guest, Shelley Jacks from Magnus Health. Shelley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Shelley Jacks. I'm the director of Magnus Health. So we're a disability and mental health support company. So we started in 2019. It was just myself and my admin support person, and
her name's Shelley too, right?
Her name is also Shelley. So we started off as the Shelleys, and so I was working as a psychologist, and I was actually doing some applications for people to get on the NDIS and having some pretty good success with that. And then someone that I was providing supervision for with the NDIS said to me, "You should do SIL support." And you should do this, community access. And so what I had to do is figure out what was that and how did that exactly work. And so she showed me all of those things and how that worked. And so we ended up supporting a lovely woman with one-to-one SIL. And so from then on, we moved into more SIL and more community access support. And we've grown since then. I think we have 160 support staff now. A few SILs, and we're also doing still psychology, counselling and positive behaviour support in the Beenleigh area, so in the southeast Queensland area. So it's been a bit of a journey for us. Yeah. That's us. So
Yeah. So you've got some really interesting background as well. So before you even started NDIS, tell us a little bit about what you did prior to NDIS.
Yeah. So I was a person that didn't know what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So eventually I figured out that I didn't want to do what I was doing, which was a bunch of sales work. So I went and decided to go to uni. And while I was at uni, I figured out that I just really love psychology. So I jumped into psychology. And once I finished psychology, it makes it sound like a really short journey, but it wasn't.
Psychology is a long journey.
It's a long journey. It's not for the faint-hearted.
No, it's not.
So once I finished psychology, I was looking for a part-time job because I had a child. And so probation and parole had a part-time job at Southport Probation and Parole. So I decided, that would be fun, and got that position and started working in for corrections, so community corrections initially, and then went into working in the prison system and went from there to treating the most high-risk sexual offenders, violent offenders in Queensland, and also doing domestic violence groups. So I worked as a facilitator for a men's domestic violence program for 10 years at probation and parole, and also the group programs. And so I looked after also all of the psychologists and counsellors at Wolston Correctional Centre, and we delivered a bunch of pretty intensive programs.
Wow.
So the program that I used to deliver was actually 9 hours a week for 10 to 12 months.
Wow. Okay. So in prison?
In prison.
Yeah.
9 hours a week for 10 to 12 months, 12 guys who had usually committed pretty horrific sexual offences or a number of offending, like come back a few different times.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of where you learn how to do your job. If you,
I was going to say only female with 10 to 12 sexual offender in one room. That would have been pretty scary. I would be scared.
Yeah.
I would think twice before waking up every morning going, okay, how do you psych yourself?
Yeah.
It
was actually the best time, weirdly. So I actually really loved it because there is I don't know anywhere else where you can learn to do that level of intensive therapy. So it was two facilitators in the room.
Yeah.
So it was myself and another female facilitator.
Wow. Okay.
And so, they would really test your mettle often.
Absolutely. I can imagine that.
Yeah. So I remember I had been in this group for a little while, and a co-facilitator came in, and she was a young female. I think she was probably, I don't know, maybe she's 25 or maybe a bit older. And she was very pretty. Yeah. And so she came into the room as the co-facilitator, and I remember this guy, this massive guy, and he just gave it to her when he gave it to her, and I was sitting there thinking, I cannot rescue her because this will not go down well. She needs to just demonstrate her ability to stand up for herself. And she did. She was amazing, just
Yeah.
looked like nothing bothered her. It
Yep.
was all good. And then we left for a break and we're in the tea room. We're like, oh, my goodness. You did so well,
You need a
it's
stiff
all
drink.
okay. Yeah. So anyway, so I learned lots about how do we do therapy
Yeah.
with people, how do we get people to change, how do we get people to think about what it is they're doing and how they've come around with particular beliefs, and then how we get them to do something differently.
Yeah. Okay.
Had lots of practice.
So within those group of guys, let's say within those group of guys, how many of those people have got some kind of disability, whether that's intellectual or mental health?
Yeah.
I would assume there would be a few.
Yeah, definitely. So there'd be a lot. There's looking back, because it's not something we really thought about a lot in that when I was there. But so we used to have that particular group. That was the high intensity sexual offender program. There was also another group that was called the inclusions program at the time, and that was for people who might be on the spectrum, so might have autism, or they might have some sort of intellectual disability, or they might have mental health conditions that would stop them from being able to engage in this other more, cognitive, high intensity, intellectual, like writing, reading sort of a program. Yeah. There's also a lot of people in that high intensity program that have really significant mental health concerns, so and had done so from a young age. Yeah. Also people with significant trauma, PTSD, as you can imagine. Like you don't get to that place in your life for no reason. Yeah. So definitely there was I would say an overrepresentation in the prison system of people with an intellectual disability and people who are neurodivergent, so ASD, ADHD, those kinds of disabilities. Yeah.
So are these the group of people that you now help? So they've been integrated back into the community?
Yeah.
Is that the group of people that you predominantly work with?
So at the moment what we do is, so we're supporting people with a disability, all disabilities, right? Yeah. So, but we do tend to come across people that have been in the criminal justice system. Mm-hmm. So psychology speaking, so because we do psychology, then we do pre-sentence reports, so reports for court for people. We do treatment and we have group therapy. And those are the things that we do for people with disability and without disability.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess as a provider, I've had the experience myself where I've received a referral for someone who's got background of sexual offending. Yeah. Now, what would be, I guess, your take or from your experience, what would you give to us as a resource or a conversation around how do we support someone with, sexual offending in a SIL setting?
In a SIL. Yeah. So that in-home care support. Because I guess it depends on what sort of, I think what people need to do is they need to not have broad strokes around certain things, So people go, oh, that person's had a sexual offending history or they've been charged in the past. So therefore they are a sexual offender and that's pretty scary and don't really know what to do with them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I would think twice before I would even accept, because I don't have the experience. Yeah. I don't want to fail that person. I don't want to fail my staff. So I guess, having the knowledge and
about what to do
absolutely.
And how to properly support them. Yeah. Because what we want to do is we want to support the person. We want to also make sure that the community is safe and we want to also make sure that the staff are safe, right? So we want to do all of those things. Yes. And it can be really difficult to do all those things at the same time. So what we want to know, I think, is what sort of offending has happened in the past. Yeah. So what we would do, generally speaking, is we would map the offence. Yeah. In therapy, that's how we would figure out. So we map an offence and we look at what happened before, during and after, very similar to what we would do with positive behaviour support. Yeah. And then we would think about, okay, so what are the things that are likely to lead to an offence, or what are the things that mean that this person is of an increased risk of offending? Mm-hmm. And then we would do things to ensure that those things were less likely to happen, or that there were things in place, when they went to that certain place. Or, for example, there are lots of people now getting charged and convicted of child pornography offending. Yes. So, child exploitation material is what we would call it. So they've been charged with that. And so what we want to do, or they've used it before, potentially not being caught yet, that kind of thing, and we have an idea what's going on. So we might report that to the police, but they might not have the tools to be able to figure that out for, be able to charge that person. So we can see the path of how this stuff happens. So, when you think about maybe someone with an intellectual disability, for example, and this is not, it's never all people.
Yeah.
It's some people, right? Just like your average person, not all people are going to be exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
So we'll have someone maybe with an intellectual disability that has sexual needs, and they're not getting those sexual needs met because they're not able to connect with certain people. So what they then might do is go online.
Yeah.
Right, because online is just so easily accessible for people, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so then they might start searching up something. So they might have enough capacity to be able to look for sexual acts that interest them. Then they might view those acts. Then they might masturbate towards that stuff, and then that stuff is like burned in their brain of things that are good to look at, right?
Yes.
And so they continue to go back to those things, and then the internet does what the internet does and sends people more of that stuff, right?
That's right.
So then they'll be clicking here and clicking there, and I think that kind of pornography type addiction, or looking at those things, people are often looking for something that's more. So they look for something, and then that's no longer doing it for them. So then look for something with, increased deviancy is what we call it. And then they look for something else. And then before they know it, they've gone down this rabbit hole where they're looking at child exploitation material. And that might be a path of looking at, teenagers.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and I was looking at 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
And then so they go down that path, and before they know it, then they've got, police storming into their house. But they might not necessarily understand
exactly what just happened.
Happened.
Yeah. And how it got to that point.
How it got there, right?
Yeah.
So, and why it's even not a good thing to be doing, or what is even the impact of that.
So I guess how can we educate ourselves as a provider? How can we educate the community? And I guess how can the NDIS support, people with disabilities that are going down that track, not really knowing what they've done wrong? So I guess it's more that awareness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Educating us as a provider and educating the whole community.
Yeah.
So I guess how can we do that as a community? What would be your take to that?
It's more that it is education, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot about education around what are the pitfalls of that kind of behaviour.
Yeah.
And then also what we know about offending of any description, and particularly sexual offending, is that there's this model called the Good Lives model.
Yeah.
So if people are having a good life, if they're connected, they've got some purpose in their lives, they feel like they have some agency about where they're headed to and what they want to do, then they generally don't do these things because they've got other things to do, right? Yeah. So what we want to do is help people to have a good life.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that a provider can do.
Yeah.
So it's helping people to figure out, rather than we're just going to sit at home and we're going to watch the TV, or we try and encourage people to do the things that we know will make them happy.
Absolutely.
So we do those things while still understanding and holding in the other hand the potential risk.
Yeah.
And how do we manage those things? So if it was, say, computer type offending, then we would want to maybe put some things on the computer to assist with managing, like that people can't access certain things, with their permission, ideally, because ideally you want to get people to a place where they go, no, I don't want to go to prison.
Absolutely.
This is not a good path for me. I'm really not very good at dealing with my own impulsivity, so I'm happy for you to help me with that. Or alternatively, it might be like any computer things, we put them in public space, like we put them in spaces where other people can see. A lot of offending happens on people's phones nowadays, though.
Yeah, yes.
So it's really, really
very
hard,
accessible as well, where they can just take it to the bathroom, for example.
Yeah. And so the other thing that can happen as well is then, because we haven't talked about like contact type offending.
Yeah.
So that might be as well people who have a disability that's that means that they're going to struggle to, how shall we say, like read the room, like understand what consent is.
Yes.
Understand, how I approach someone without encroaching on their.
Wow. Yeah. Actually, I feel like I've just spoken about this topic with Cherryl from Disabilities. We were actually talking about that around that consent, about the boundary. So it's teaching her students, what does that look like? And before it even gets to that point, it's teaching them how to be able to read somebody and how to approach them appropriately. Yeah. And it's that good life, I know, and that connection as well. Yeah. So it does come hand in hand, doesn't it? And I think, that education right from the very beginning, before they get to that point of offending, it's giving them that skills to be able to learn and educate themselves. So, and I think, having more providers like yourselves, the work that you do, the work that other providers do around this, I think it's absolutely necessary in this space. I guess from a family's perspective, if, how can you tell when somebody, someone with a disability living at home with their mums and dads, showing some sexualized behaviors, sometimes families just go into that panic mode of, oh my God, poor John, my Johnny is doing all this. I mean, what can we do? What should they do to sort of get that, I guess, the education and that help so that they understand how to support poor Johnny? Don't ignore it. Yeah. Because I think we have this tendency, and a lot of people have grown up with this idea that we don't talk about sex. Oh God. Again, that topic we spoke about. Yeah. Yes. So like we don't not talk about it. Yep. And we want to identify, I guess, like we want to start those things from a young age, like talking about like normalizing a conversation about sexual things, and that's okay, that all of those things are very normal things to talk about. So then you've kind of opened the door to a conversation, right? We can't assess any kind of risk of sexual offending until someone's actually committed a sexual offence. Yeah. Because, we don't know who's going to offend and who isn't until they do those things. Yes. But what we can do is we can, optimise someone's life so that they're less likely to offend. Yeah. So if someone's showing, it's like over-sexualised behaviours. Yeah. So they're doing things that are possibly, not appropriate or not normal, so more outside of the box of what you would expect normally. Yeah. So like we talk about in prison, we talked about what is excessive masturbation for your average person. And then what, so if someone's doing that more than, so if they're doing that 3 times a day or to the point of pain, then that's not ideal. That's not normal. That's not normal behaviour, right? So then we want to talk about like why is that happening? And usually that's happening because there's not a lot else going on in people's lives. Absolutely. That's hyper focused on that thing as well. Yeah. So how do we redirect people? How do we get people to, because often that people are trying to get their intimacy needs met. Yep. Yeah. So we want to get people's intimacy needs met with proper, real connection and not pornography and not just sexualized stuff, which doesn't meet people's needs really. Yeah. So as much as we can, we want to be able to identify and then seek some support. Yeah. Because if you're not able to have those conversations, go to someone who is. Yeah. So I would say psychology, counselling, bringing up the issue, talking about it, figuring out like what do we do next? Yeah. Or is this a problem? Or is this just not is it normal? Like who knows? Yeah, because sometimes you don't know what's normal if you don't know anything better.
Well, if you've never spoken about it, maybe
That's right.
and look I don't know if for anybody it feels normal to have, an adult child in their house masturbating. I don't know how I'm sorry, I've said this word a lot of times now, so I don't know how cool this is on your podcast.
We're talking everything.
Yeah, good. Okay, well, yes, we are. But so it just feels really weird. I know that my I won't say that, but when my children are growing up, it's so strange for them to become from those little kids, and you're like, oh, they're so sweet, and you still think of them like that until they're growing up. Like, oh, okay, they're actual adult people now. And we need to expect different things, and but we don't want to make them feel bad about their sexuality either, because there's a lot of shame drive them
right.
underground, you know, like
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of people who have been gay, and then that they knew that wasn't okay in their family.
Yeah.
And so then that there's a lot of shame that goes along with that.
Yes.
And then they don't talk about that. They don't seek out partners.
Yeah.
So then they're looking internet-wise or some other way to get their sexual needs met that's not healthy.
Yeah.
And that can lead them down a really terrible path. So
wow. Internet can really lead you to a terrible path, can't it?
It's really hard.
It's scary, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about, online dating.
Yes.
That's really scary.
Yeah.
Alone, you know, and on top of that, everything else that you can find online, but people with disability are on Tinder, for example. You know, it's really scary who's out there.
Yeah.
You know, they're out there catfishing, for example. Is that what they call these days? Catfish?
Apparently.
I don't even know what that really means.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely scary. And so I guess when we're talking about people that you've worked with, have you seen some really great things? Some great evidence to say like this person has come a long way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see people that have really sort of sexualized behaviors in the community, say inappropriate things to people, see inappropriate things about people, start to understand that what's okay and what's not okay and why as well. So developing that empathy. So they're developing empathy for the other person, trying to put themselves in their shoes, trying to figure out how they would feel if stuff like that happened to them. So that's definitely something that we see a lot when we're providing support for people.
Yeah.
I've also seen, a young man that I think he was charged with some sort of online offending come into our psychology, and you see, initially his social skills were very poor, wouldn't talk to you and look at you. You would never be able to converse with him, but him going to psychology and then going to a social skills support group where you just practice talking to people and having conversations and conversation starters and all of those kinds of things. He's really come out of his shell.
No, that's awesome.
And he's so much happier, and his family just were at their wits' end, had no idea what to do with him. But definitely they're now all very much happier as well.
So good. Again, it comes back down to that social connection, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And lots of practice with talking.
Yeah. So we obviously don't need that practice, but lots of people do, and it doesn't come easy.
Absolutely.
And I would really suggest that if it is a difficult thing for them to do, that it's just a skill.
Yeah.
It's just a skill you can learn. You just need to go and learn it. So find the right people to support you to learn the things that you need to do. Because everyone has the right to be able to have a relationship of some description.
Absolutely.
Everyone has a right to have a good life, to do whatever it is they want to do. And there's lots of people out there that can support you to do those things. So,
no, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Shelley.
That's okay.
Oh, thank you. Well, hopefully we can come back and have another kind of discussion.
Yeah.
We'll definitely be in touch.
Yeah.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thanks, Cheryl.
Thanks.